Good evening, everybody. Hello. I am Molly Moran. I am the owner of Table Wine, and tonight we're going to talk about oak aging. So this is Dig into Oak Aging. If you are joining us live, I have two requests before we get started. One, if you could fill out the poll, that would be really helpful for me. Tonight's group is small but mighty, and I think of most of you as kind of like the core group of people who take virtual classes. So I realize that I'm kind of tipping the scales by asking you if you're interested in continuing to take virtual classes. But I really am curious kind of what people's comfort level is, how much people want to be gathering in person versus how much you want to continue to do this. There are benefits and drawbacks for me to do either option, I guess, really. So I'm just kind of trying to weigh stuff. So your input is incredibly valuable. I'm also curious to learn about like how much oak do you all like in your wines? And then the question on the table that nobody except Katya and Drew are answering, and this is an important one, guys, is if you could take a wine class about literally any topic, what would it be? Tonight's class came as a direct request by one of the attendees. And it was something that I had in my mind for a long time, but having someone ask for it was like, aha, yeah, I should, okay, yep, it's time to do that class. And that is really how some of my most favorite classes come about, is that people push me to do something maybe outside my comfort zone or just not something that's on my radar. So please do. Like, seriously, nothing's too basic, nothing's off the table. You can just, please give suggestions. I'm not saying that I'll necessarily teach them. I'm just curious what you're curious about. Okay, nobody's jumping on that train. So I guess I'll just deal with it. Okay, yeah. More blind classes. Cool, okay. Thank you guys. Think, and you know where to reach me if you... And they don't have to be brilliant ideas, but if you have any brilliant ideas, I'm all ears. So more blind classes. I've been led to believe that Kristen and Patty Kristen has some sort of blind tasting suggestion, something out there. I don't know. Oh, but yes to more blind classes. Okay. I love blind classes. So, okay. I'm game, guys. If you haven't procured 2 wine glasses for yourself, that's really going to be the most beneficial. If you have the possibility of having 2 glasses for the 2 different pairs of wines, it's going to be really great for you to be able to go back and forth between them without having to, dump or chug. So that would be my suggestion. So take a second and get that if you haven't already. If you want to be drinking while I chat about kind of high level stuff, I would recommend starting with the de Fourville Barbera d'Alba. If you are not drinking these specific wines, but you got wines that are similar to them, hopefully you got something, well, I guess I'd say just like the less oaky of your Barberas. If you're not drinking our pairing, that's going to be the lightest of the 4 wines that we have tonight. So if you want something in your glass right now, do that. So let's dig in to oak aging, because there's like so much. Would be interested in Germany. Cool. Okay, great suggestions, Kathleen and Richard. Thank you. I did do Germany, but it's occurring to me that I did that live and in person and not virtual. So that could be very cool. So that's great. Okay, so let's talk about oak and why do winemakers use it in the first place? There are 3 main things that oak does for wine. One, it adds desirable flavors. So I came across something in my research that said, unlike beer, you can't add anything else to wine, so like in brewing, you could add actual peppercorns, right? You could add actual vanilla beans. You can't do that in winemaking with any respect and get any sort of past any labeling restrictions. So the way to do that comes from the grapes themselves and all sorts of other things, but oak is one of those other things. So By oak aging, you can get all sorts of aromas and flavors. On my tasting board at the shop, if any of you have ever seen it, there's a whole category of oak. So things like vanilla, chocolate, coffee, that whole kind of group of things comes from oak. Smoke, tobacco, that kind of grouping, and then clove, cinnamon, baking spice, lots of other things, mocha, caramel, butterscotch, all those kinds of things come from oak aging, and that can be desirable. So that's, one main reason. The other reason that winemakers use it is that it allows oxygen into the wine in a very slow, methodical way. So it's not a massive amount of oxygen, but it is just kind of like a little tiny trickle, which actually is good for winemaking. So it helps smooth the wines out, particularly higher tannin wines. It makes them less astringent. So you're getting a little less of that bite from the tannins. So that is one huge reason that winemakers would choose to age in oak rather than aging in stainless steel. The other reason that oxygen allows for some bacterial happenings to go on, things that they do want. The biggest one is malolactic fermentation. So malolactic fermentation is when the malic acid, which is green apple acid, turns into lactic acid, which is cream acid. So again, it's a way to get wines to taste creamier, smoother, silkier. So that applies to red and whites. Malolactic, almost all reds go through it. It's not as common with white. Chardonnay is the one that it is most common with, but it is what you do want that in red wine. So oak makes it all possible to happen naturally and easily. There are two main types of oak. That's really kind of our breakdown tonight in terms of our pairing. So there are two species, two varietals. There's American oak, and that's actually mostly from here and from Minnesota. There's some in Missouri, but it's mostly up here. And the thing about American oak, we'll talk more specifically when we get to it, but the one kind of like big thing to know is that it has high wood sugar content. So sweet oak is a tasting note often, and it comes from, most often it's going to be American oak that you would ever kind of like even enter that world of thinking about that. But those tasting notes where I was talking about like caramel, butterscotch, those kinds of things are more common with wines that are aged in American oak because they have that actual real sugar. The other varietal is European oak. So it's mostly in France, but there are other places, and we're going to see that as well tonight. And the thing about French oak, the thing that differentiates it is that it has a high tannin content. So oak wood actually has tannins in it. So wines that are aged in French oak tend to have more tannin and often get a little bit more spice to them. There are a whole lot of other things that are important about oak that determine how you're going to smell and taste oak characteristics. When I say oak characteristics, I don't mean literal oakiness. Sometimes that's how it shows up. Sometimes it shows up in just like it has a little more structure to it. The tannins are a little firmer, those kinds of things. So don't take it as meaning like it's going to taste like wood in my glass. So those factors are a lot. There are a lot of them. Where did the trees grow? Things like how close the trees grew to each other, how straight they grow, like believe it or not, is like super, super important and changes drastically. The same species of oak is grown throughout Europe and throughout France. You can see like this pocket here is different than this pocket here in terms of like what the wood is like. The cut of the wood, we'll talk about that when it comes time to get to our American friend, how much they toast the oak. So they're not going to just pour wine literally into raw wood barrels, but it could be a light toast on it. It could be like a pretty heavy char on it. If you know anything about whiskey, you know, those barrels are charred, like black, right? That's like bourbon barrels are like that. I do have a photo later about kind of toasting, but they can control a lot of that. New versus used. Has the barrel been used before? How many times has it been used before? Has it been used so many times that it's really neutral, that it's not really doing that much? It's letting a little bit of oxygen in, but you're not really going to get much oak. Is it brand new spanking wood and you're going to really kind of like get some of those flavors from it? The size of the vessel that is used, we're going to talk about that throughout tonight. That plays a large role. It really does. It like actually really matters. Which is kind of funny because it's like one of those things where when I first started getting into wine, people would, wine professionals, you know, would talk about these things and I'd be kind of like, okay, man, like, I don't know. So it's in a Foudre. Okay. I don't even know what a Foudre is. Let alone why that would matter. And my goal for tonight is so that you have some sense of like, why does that matter? And then the time spent in that vessel, I think that should make sense, right? Like if it's aged in new oak, which is going to impart more oakiness, and it's aged in new oak for a year, that's going to be different than a wine that's aged in new oak for 6 months. If it's aged in, you know, a huge vessel, less wine is actually coming in contact with the oak. If it's aged in a very small vessel, more wine is coming in contact with oak. So I think that you can start to see the logic of like, oh, I see why all of those things matter. But it can be a lot. So I'm going to try to make it not too overwhelming. Before we jump to to the wines themselves, any questions to get us started? Any of that information you want me to slow down on? The question is, when a usually cheaper bottle tastes strongly of wood, like popsicle sticks, what causes that? You can't hear me? Can everybody else hear me? Okay, so Carrie and Chris, if you can't, let's see. Sorry, everybody, hold on 1 second. Okay. Hopefully that gets sorted out. Sorry. Okay. Fixed it. Okay, yay. Hi. Can you hear me? Oh, technology. Does that change anybody's poll answer? Oh, I'm curious. Actually, I'm going to check in with the poll. Okay, so a lot of you somewhat prefer online. That's cool. Again, I kind of knew that, knowing that you are the people who are taking tonight's class, but I'm curious. I was just curious. And also super awesome to see that no one's like, yes, give me all the oak. Love it. I love that those are our poll answers. Okay. To the question of, hey, when a wine tastes like popsicle sticks, why is that? Well, a really easy way to get wine to taste oaky is to put oak in the wine. So when I say that, I don't mean like when I was talking about brewing earlier and I said you could add actual peppercorns to the brewing. I mean, I guess actually it is kind of the same thing. You can add like literal like staves, wood staves, you know, the slats that make up a barrel. You are allowed, a winemaker is allowed to put that actually in the wine. I'm sorry, I have a little tickle. So that's going to give it that kind of raw woodiness. My understanding is that some folks might actually put like sawdust in their cheap wine. And that can also, you know, I think popsicle stick is like a really great way of describing that. I've always said, like, I don't want a tree in my wine. I came up as an adult, I came into drinking in the early 2000s, and it was right around the time I think most of you were too young, but there were wines like Toasted Head, these like super toasty oak Chardonnays, where it really did taste like you went out and licked a tree. So that's not so cool, not so delicious. Any questions on fundamental stuff? If not, and you haven't already poured yourself some Barbera, let's pour yourself some Barbera. Like I said, my intention would be that you taste these side by side. But if you are going one at a time, let's start with the de Fourville, and then we'll get to the Conterno. Or if you have both, like kind of sip on the de Fourville for a little bit while I chat. And then we can taste them side by side. So outside of France, there are a couple of pockets of oak that are super important to winemaking. And one of those is in a region in Croatia called Slavonia. For the longest time, I thought it was Slovenia, the country. I know many people, wine professionals who I greatly admire, who talk about Slovenian and Slavonian as if they are interchangeable. They are not. So Slavonian is the region. There is also Slovenian oak, is my understanding, but very little of it. It's not common. Slavonian oak is actually the common oak. So learn something new every day. So things that are interesting about Slavonian oak, when I said that, like, you know, you have the same species, but depending on where it grows, makes a difference. Slavonian oak is particularly tight grained. So that means that the rings are very, very, very tight. And the way that wood is cut for barrels, when it's super tight grained, they have to follow the sap lines. So it doesn't give them a lot of variance in terms of how they're going to cut that wood. So Slavonian oak is always cut with the grain. So they're very long, if you can imagine it, right? It's a tree, and they're going to cut it that whole length. Now, obviously, they can cut it in half after, or cut it in pieces after that, but they do go with the grain. One of the benefits of that is that then you have these very large pieces of wood, and so you can make very, very large barrels, which we will see on the next slide. So those barrels that are made of Slavonian oak are called boti. And they can be anywhere between 1,000 liters and 10,000 liters, which is like a lot of wine. I think it can be hard to like conceptualize how much wine we're talking about, but each bottle here isn't even a liter, right? So every 2 bottles is 3 liters. So now we're talking, think about that exponentially. We're talking about a lot of wine. Slavonian oak is most commonly used in Italy, particularly in Piedmont. It's close to Slavonia, and for that reason, it's been where they've been getting these barrels for a very long time. It's really common in Piedmont where the wineries are going to use the same barrel ad infinitum. They are going for that very neutral style, so they are using it really to get some oxygen into the wine, to get the malolactic fermentation to happen. And that's kind of all they want. So because it's so large, as I said earlier, because it's so large, not that much wine is actually coming in contact with the barrels themselves. So it's not going to produce a lot of oakiness. I'm actually going to skip ahead for just a second and show you how large of a barrel. And again, this is just one size. They can be bigger. There's not, to be called a boti, it's not like oh my gosh, it has to be exactly this size, but they're large. So there's a lot of wine swimming around in there. And for that reason, what you're going to get is really kind of fruit forward wine, really supple wine. So we're doing Barbera tonight. I think Barbera is really fun to taste from an oak, learning oak standpoint, because Barbera is such a clean grape without a lot of, tannins and acidity kind of messing with your mind too much. But they often use those gigantic barrels. That's what they use in Barolo. That's what they use in Barbaresco to chill Nebbiolo out, to have it calm down a little bit. So, but here we get Barbera, so we get to kind of see it in its prettiest form. So it is aged in oak, but you'll notice right away that it's not super oaky. The food pairing suggestions tonight on each of the slides are specific to these wines. I am not going to say this is what all wines aged in Slavonian oak would pair with, because that's impractical. I mean, that, there are similarities between wines that are aged in Slavonian oak, but I can't say like, you know, all food, everything. Alexis is asking, do the barrels get filled completely or at varying levels? Usually completely. You know, I mean, not like literally up to the tippy top, but yeah, it would be rare to like not use them for what they're worth. With the question rotated and rolled occasionally, or just sit there? With barrels that large, they just sit there. Good questions, guys. Yeah, they're not gonna risk losing 10,000 liters of Barolo. Let's just think about that, right? Nobody's gonna do that. I'm thinking I'm gonna talk about the next Barbera, and then we can kind of check in on both wines. But if you're just desperate to tell me what you're thinking of this one, I am all ears. I'm drinking one at a time. Just, I don't really know why I did that to myself, but I did. So the other vessel that we're going to talk about in terms of Barbera is French Barrique. When we get to Tempranillo, we're going to talk a little bit more about French oak. So I just kind of wanted to like call out French Barrique. So French Barriques are 225 liter vessels. So what we're comparing is something that's at least more than 4 times the size of the thing that we're going to taste now. So you really get to see, you know, it's both European oak. There's a little bit of difference between them, but you really get to see the difference in the size and how much that matters. French Barrique is really common wine barrel size. There's a slight difference between the Bordeaux Barrique and the Burgundy Barrique, but it's literally 3 liters, so I'm not going to really stress about that too much. With French Barrique, they're known for kind of subtle wood characteristics because it is a smaller vessel. So I'm not going to say that there's like no wood. But the wines, generally speaking, that are produced from French Barrique are pretty elegant. The reason that winemakers use this style of barrel is to really kind of control how much oxygen is getting in to the wines over time. It's like a great way of controlling it all. So I can show you these, right? So this is, I think, what most of us, if you've ever visited a winery, this is what most of us kind of like have in our brains as a wine barrel is most likely a French Barrique. If you didn't know why the Cafe Barriques is called this is why. And it is based on that. So in case you were ever wondering that. The de Fourville is great. Katya says it's tart, which she doesn't always love in a red, but this is in a way she likes. And Carrie and Chris really like the de Fourville. How are others feeling? I feel like the de Fourville, well, we were talking about blind tasting, guys. I feel like the de Fourville is like a very pretty example of Barbera. Like I feel like you get to taste Barbera. Some Barberas, when they're aged in stainless steel, which we've had, you know, we carry some that are aged in stainless. We carry, I might not have it on the shelf right now, but I often carry one that's aged in concrete. I think the de Fourville, it has that like suppler body, I guess is the way that I would say that. Patty said he's not sure if he would have picked up on it being oaked if we didn't know it was. Yeah. I agree with you. I totally agree with you. I think the one clue on it is the way that it feels in your mouth. If you can think about, and and I feel safe like saying this to you guys because I feel like I know a lot of you and what you drink. So I think if you can think of a Barbera that's a little tartar, a little brighter, a little like more of that, and think in your head of comparing it to the de Fourville, you can be like, oh yeah, this is a little softer. This is a little rounder. And then how is the Conterno, guys? It's super elegant, right? It's like the definition of elegant. That's like a wine word that I know can be a little like, well, what does that mean? But golly, it's just so silky in the mouth. I do pick up, personally, I do pick up on a little spice in the Conterno that I wasn't getting in the de Fourville. And that would be something that I'm getting from a little bit of the French oak. French oak, that higher tannin content often equates to a little bit of spiciness. No one's asked, but I should volunteer this information so that you don't have to I don't have to wait for somebody to ask. How would I know? How, when I am shopping and I know that I like French Barrique, how would I know that? You know, when I'm picking a wine from a wine list, how do I go for one that's aged in French oak instead of Slavonian oak? Or I want Slavonian tonight because I want a fruitier style. You can't, guys. You can't know that just by looking at the bottle. You can't know it by the back label. And to be like super perfectly honest with you, I'm not even going to say that the person who's selling you the wine isn't necessarily even going to know that information for every single wine. I've waited tables in too many restaurants to claim like, oh yeah, your server will know that information. Like maybe they will, depends on the restaurant where you are. So what you can know is, like I said at the beginning, that Slavonian oak is really common in Piedmont. So if you like the Slavonian style, you're probably going to be finding it more commonly in Piedmontese wines, particularly Barolo or Barbaresco. We have done Italian wine class before that I think some of you have attended. Barbera d'Alba is what we're drinking tonight. So Barbera is the grape, right? I'm going to tilt it. So yeah, there we go. So Barbera is the grape, and then Alba is the subregion within Piedmont. So it's common in Alba to age Barbera in oak, in Barbera or in Asti, which would be the other kind of like main place, Barbera d'Asti, if that sounds familiar to you. It's more common to age in stainless, concrete, or very, very, very neutral barrels. So if you like the Conterno, if you like that little bit more, pardon me, the little spice, but also the suppleness of it, then look for Alba. Look for Alba. So that would be one. Ellen's asking, is there a level of oak or is it more just what the oak adds? I guess I'm not entirely sure what you mean by, is there a level of oak? Sometimes people say something is oaky. Yeah. So when people are talking about something is oaky, what they're talking about is that it smells or tastes literally like oak. A wine can be, I mean, we're going to see it here. We are seeing it here, right? Where wines are aged in oak, but they don't taste or smell oaky. So in our case, in what we're focusing on, at least for right now, we'll see if you guys pick it up in the second pair. But for the Barberas, the point was to kind of see the difference in the size of barrel, and kind of like what that imparts to the way that the wine feels. So I hope that helps. Cool. And Kristen and Patty are asking, is price point a clue? Right, because barrels are expensive. So you'd think that barrels would be a clue, or I'm sorry, price point would be a clue. But, I showed you those Boti. These things have been around. I mean, not maybe those specific ones, but some Boti, I mean, you'll see them. They're like covered in like tartaric acid, and they've been in the wineries for, you know, I don't know. All they ever say is like forever. When I was in Rioja, you know, I saw some fermentation tanks that are made out of oak that have been there for more than 100 years. So those have been paid off. You know, they're not charging you for the bottle necessarily to pay for the barrel, if that makes sense. So I wouldn't say that 100% price point is going to clue you in. It can, but like I'm thinking we have the Viberti Barbera d'Alba on the shelf, and it's 15, which is no different than the Guido Berta. And you know, the Viberti is aged in oak, and Guido Berta is not. So, you know, I hope that helps. Katja and Drew are saying they think wines aged in French oak tend to have notes of baking spice, and sometimes are almost Christmassy, enjoying the spicier. Yeah, I would agree with you. That is a common thing that people say, that they have that baking spice kind of note. How do others feel about the pairing? I know that right away we had some like de Fourville lovers. My wine totally went down the wrong pipe. It's live TV here, guys. Oh my goodness. I'm going to let you chat for a second. That's so fun. Okay. I can kind of sort of breathe. Going back to the de Fourville, it feels so much lighter. Now that's great. I'm going to go back to it and see. And hopefully get rid of this. I did spit. I was spitting. That's what happened. I guess, well, it did go down my, yeah, no, I couldn't have been spitting. You're right. That's fair. We both really like number 1. Number 2 is nice, but not quite for us. I love both, but keep coming back to the Conterno. That's great. I love to, you know, I love to see when people don't all agree on the same wine as the favorite. So. I do feel like the, pardon me, I do feel like the de Fourville does feel a bit lighter. The Conterna has a pleasant sour funkiness to the nose. Is that related to the oak and the aging? Let me smell it for a sec. I'm kind of curious what you're picking up on. Oh, yeah. Yep. Yeah, that's the oak aging. Yes, that's that kind of, I mean, Ellen was asking about oakiness earlier. I wouldn't say that this is oaky, but it does smell kind of like being in a wine cellar at a winery. When all the wine is in those barrels and you can kind of like smell the wood and the wine, it definitely smells like that. I got the question about food pairing. So yes, absolutely. Let me bring those back for a hot second. I know that you're asking specifically for the second one, but let's talk about the first one. So the de Fourville, like anything you want, really, it's like easy. You're tasting it. You can kind of think of it as like, cheese plate. Like I'm going to buy a whole bunch of different kind of cheeses, spaghetti and meatballs, chicken cacciatore, basically like red sauce, things like that. It's an easygoing wine. With the Conterno, it does have a little bit more, subtleness, I think. So I love it with roasted game meats. So the kind of the classic thing would be cingale, which is wild boar ragu. So if you were gonna, maybe get takeout from Papavero. You could get cincale and have it with that. Roasted venison, polenta with mushrooms, truffles, those kinds of things. It's really, it has that kind of earthiness to it that would be really great. Ellen saying that a Fourville is so funky and leathery that it's hard to get light. I feel like I'm smoking a cigar while I'm drinking. I am like, I don't know, Ellen. I am curious if the wine, if your bottle, like, I'm curious if something's wrong with your bottle. Is anybody else picking up on like funk or leather with the de Fourville? That doesn't, I've had the wine quite a few vintages and I'm drinking it right now. And I'm curious why it's so smoky. Maybe that's just your palate. A slight funk on the nose, but not on the palate. Yeah, I guess there's like a little animal kind of something going on. But I don't get like overwhelming smoke. Well then, Ellen, you know what? It's just not for you. It's just not your wine. And that is A-okay, right? You don't have to, not everything's gonna win. So Alexis, if you ever have to give Ellen a bottle of wine for any reason, just don't pick that wine. Other than that, I'd agree with you that it's a great gifting wine. But okay, cool. Questions about those Barberas, about Slavonian huge Boti / French Barrique. We're going to continue to talk about French oak here in just a second, so it's not gone forever. But any questions about any of that stuff? Love Barbera. Great. When I was planning class, I said this in the email that I sent out. I always do 3 wines for class, and I thought that pairing and tasting things side by side really is more helpful than if we just drank kind of 3 different grapes and kind of like in these like 3 little buckets, because it's hard to draw comparisons and contrasts between different grapes, right, in different regions. So I appreciate that you were all game for it. I know that it was not as easy on the pocketbook as some other classes, but hey, Mary Taylor was like super pocketbook friendly. So thank you. I appreciate it. I do think it's like an incredibly informative way to really learn this stuff. I also, I know that everybody thought it was going to be like the Chardonnay party, which I don't know why everybody just assumes that. So I'm glad we're doing red wine tonight. All right. Are we good? Okay. So now we're going to talk about French versus American, which is like my internal struggle, right? So if you want to pour yourself something to start, I would say, go with the Remy Uri, but you can also just pour both and kind of go back and forth between them while I talk at you. So French oak, to go into a little more detail about French oak specifically, because I was talking kind of more about the barrique and the size of it. So French oak is also tight grained, right? It's the same species as that Slavonian. So it is also cut with the grain. And it is used throughout the world. So whereas Slavonian oak, it's very rarely seen, like for instance, let's say in South America, that's not common to have Slavonian oak in South America. French oak is used throughout the wine producing world. And its calling card, we've already picked up on some of it, right? Spice, a little bit more tannin, is used to produce the idea being like elegance. It's really truly it. French oak can be used to make vessels of all sizes. So one of the really cool things about this wine specifically is that it's all French oak, pretty neutral French oak. and it's varying sizes of barrel that are then blended together. So the winemaker here is Telmo Rodriguez. I think some of you have heard me wax on about Telmo. He's an absolutely amazing person and an amazing winemaker. And so he likes to have, like some big barrels where it's really just of the suppleness, and then some smaller barrels. And here I can show you, it's not like the best picture to show you the different sizes, but having been there, I can testify that they are all different sizes. And then he has even smaller ones as well. And so it's kind of a little bit of, alchemy, I guess I would say there. I'm going to have a sip of Remy, and then I will tell you more about American oak in a second, but I'm just going to enjoy this wine for a hot second. So. It was also super fun for me putting this lineup together because I feel like every chance I get, I pour Telmo Rodriguez wine. And so it was like, oh, here's one I haven't ever had before. It's like new to table wine. This is so exciting for me. So let's talk about American oak, and then we'll kind of compare the two things. So American, unlike our European oak friend, has a wider grain. So I mentioned earlier that they have to cut along the sap lines. When it comes to European oak, American oak has this wider, more open grain, and they can quarter saw it, which I didn't know what that meant. I had to look up diagrams of this stuff, but basically like cutting across the tree itself, and then you can quarter that. And then you can cut the boards within each of those quadrants of the circle. So the planks can be cut across the grain. So up until now, the wines have all been aged in oak where it's with the grain, and here we're going against the grain. What that means is that there's kind of, the idea is that like more oakiness. That's what people say. Is that because it's like a wider grain and it's, kind of like open grain, if you can kind of picture meat, if y'all are meat eaters. I don't mean to be gross if you're not meat eaters, but, cutting flank steak and you can kind of have the marbling there, right? It's the same kind of concept here. So American oak is used throughout the world. So it's not like, we just use American oak here. We definitely like it. New world wine regions tend to like American oak more than a lot of old world wine regions, but our friends in Rioja love it. American oak is really great with kind of powerful, fuller bodied wines. So Cabernet Sauvignon, Petit Syrah, Tempranillo, Chardonnay, those are wines that winemakers like to age in American oak. It's known for kind of producing these like powerful wines. And here is where we're getting to the more like oakiness, right? Those oaky characteristics. Sometimes oak can show up like cedar and other wood, but kind of a more obvious woodiness. So the Sace from Lubery is named Sace because it is aged just for 6 months, but it is in new American oak. So very different from Remy. So Remy is neutral French, varying sizes, and then Lubery is a new American, but it's only 6 months. So it's not as aggressive as some other Tempranillos you've had. So I like it because it is still, it's still a well-made wine, right? It's not just like wood staves in a bottle. And I did promise, here's the toastiness. This is toasting American oak. I had the opportunity to visit cooperage at one of the wineries that I visited in Rioja a few years ago. And it is so cool to watch barrels be made. Not gonna lie, it's really, really cool. All right, I'm gonna make myself big. I can bring back any of those slides at any time if any of that information. Can talk about food pairing in a hot second. Ellen's asking, are there woods outside of oak that people use? Why just oak? And no, I did not go over that information. I feel like there's like so much information. So oak was used. It has been used since medieval times. If you think about like Renaissance paintings, they're just like barrels of wine, like off in the corner. And that's like legitimately how wine was shipped, stored, handled. Why is it oak? Because that's what was growing in France. So there's some of that just kind of like holdover. That is what was used. And so that's what is used, is really the truth. Oak grows pretty easily, particularly American oak, right? I mean, we live here, right? We know how much oak grows. So that's another reason why it's not like a hard to get wood. And then therefore it's not so prohibitively expensive, right? Because like some wood, like mahogany or cherry, you're not going to use that to age wine in, right? You can make a piece of furniture and make a lot more money than you would. Nor could a winery afford to buy cherry wood, right? There are other woods that are used. They're not common. So the woods that are used in some little bits, English walnut, chestnut, and acacia. In my finer moments of being a total wine snob, like my most like wine professional nerdiness is the fact that I love all wines that are aged in acacia barrels. And I'm a total sucker for it. And my wine reps know that, and they'll bring me things that are aged in acacia barrels. So yeah, that's my confession there, guys. So I hope that answers that question. If they could use birch, not hard enough, I don't think so. My understanding is that it's, you need a certain level of hardness, right? You can't have a super porous wood, or that's going to kind of defeat the purpose. All right, I'm going back up. People commenting about the Sace being aggressively oaky. I definitely had the Remy in my glass, so let me see how the Sace is treating y'all. Lynn is asking, so are the barrels used for wine made specifically for wine? Are the barrels made specifically for whiskey, other spirits, or do they use leftover wine barrels? Great question. So the answer is yes. So typically a barrel is made to age wine in, and that's all it does. And a barrel is made to age whiskey in, and that's all that does. And then some very smart folks in Kentucky were like, hey, after a certain point, because with bourbon, you want really noticeable oakiness. And so the most that they can, I think my understanding is that they can only get like a couple batches in the same barrel before they have to move on to a new barrel to continue to get the oakiness, and to qualify as bourbon. It has to be charred new American oak. So here are these distilleries, they're left over or they have all of these leftover barrels. What are they going to do? Well, they're going to talk to their brewer friends, and their brewer friends are going to be like, oh, bourbon barrel aged, blah, 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 right? And so then there was like the explosion of bourbon barrel aged beers. So that's what that is, if you've ever wondered. Now you're seeing people playing around with all sorts of things. So you'll get a rum aged in a cognac cask. So that's a cask that was originally intended for cognac to be aged in, that then a rum is aged in. So then it picks up on some cognac things. You'll see it. Sherry is a really common thing. You'll get scotches that are aged in sherry casks. So they pick up on some of the sweetness of sherry. There are some questionable wines that are questionable, in my opinion, that are aged in bourbon barrels. I've tasted them. I don't know. I mean, I'm just going to drink bourbon if I want that flavor. I don't really want my red wine to taste like bourbon. That does not make sense to me, but some people like it. So, yes. So it used to be really distinct buckets, and now frankly, they're just like all these barrels. And we need, people are trying to come up with creative ways to use them. All right, I'm going to taste the Sace now. Yeah, beer tasting like bourbon is good. Wine, I agree. I'm a total beer or bourbon barrel aged beer person. I love it. I like that booziness in my beer, but in my wine, I don't know. It's just like a different thing. So Ellen Carlson was asking earlier about like the quality of oakiness. I personally, when I smell the Sace, that's what I'm smelling. I'm smelling oakiness, right? I think that it's like pretty woody. And then there's, some definite oak quality to it. It's interesting to me that French oak technically has more tannin because I find wines aged in American oak to be so much more kind of like aggressive in their tannic structure. But there's objective truth and subjective truth. So, that's just the way that it is. But for me, the Sace is like this, kind of bigger bomb. Patty's changing his answer. He's loving the super oaky version. Great. And I wouldn't say this is like holy buckets, it's so oaky, right? I purposely picked one that is just 6 months. It is balanced. There is fruit there. It is well-made wine, right? I'm going to bring this up though, because, we all love to talk about food. So with a wine like the Sace, because whether you are totally changing your answer and love it, or you're like, oh, wow, that's a little more oak than I'm used to. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Tannins and power like tannins and power. So you'll want something kind of hearty to eat with it. So burgers, be it meat or black bean or portobello mushrooms, ribs, blue cheese, my gosh, a steak sandwich with a wedge salad and some blue cheese dressing and this wine will be amazing. And Alexis is saying the more that it opens up, the more she likes it. I totally agree. And if it's like too much for you, let it breathe, let it hang out, and it'll chill out a little bit. For the Remy Uri, from a food pairing perspective, you still want something. It's not like it's like a light-bodied wine by any stretch of the imagination. But I would say maybe something slightly more subtle. So maybe not your like blue cheese on your burger with bacon and I don't know, special sauce, right? Like grilled flank steak, right? Something that is red meat, but is maybe a little leaner. Paella, be it seafood or vegetarian or, have some Spanish chorizo on it. It's also great with aged cheeses. So things like cheddar or some aged Italian cheeses, something like that. Aged manchego, if you can find it, something like that would be great. Drew loves number 2, lots of oak, but that's what he wants in a Rioja, and Katya loves number 1. Totally. And that's the thing about Rioja. So winemakers in Rioja learned decades ago, at this point, almost 100 years ago, that American oak worked really, really well with Tempranillo. And so one of the calling cards of Rioja is a bit more oakiness. So that is going to be true whether it's aged in French oak like the Remy Uri or it's aged in New American like the Luberry or somewhere in between. But you are going to notice more oakiness with Riojas that are aged. If they are really young Rioja, they might just be aged in stainless steel and you aren't going to get that. So just like heads up, be careful about that. Alexa says that her mouth is simultaneously dry from tannins and watering from the thought of paella with Spanish chorizo, right? I know. You're welcome. I did that just for you guys. Wait, so oak allows for a longer aging. Is that what I said? I don't think I said that, but it does. I don't know where, did I say that? I don't think I did. But what I think, maybe what I was referencing, Ellen, is that Riojas that are really young, so without like reteaching Rioja. So this word here, coseca, is the newest designation in Rioja, and it's basically what used to be called Joven, which is young. And so wines that are with that designation don't have to be aged in oak at all. So they could be stainless steel. So we actually have we at least have a couple Riojas at the shop that are cosecas that aren't aged in oak at all. But then when you start to get up into the Crianza level, Reserva level, Grand Reserva, that's where you'll see those designations are aging statements, and those do have to be aged in oak for a certain period of time. Do we know the breakdown for these two 100% Tempranillo? So the Remiuri is 95 temp and 5 Garnacha, and the Luberi is 100% Tempranillo. So really similar. And that was one of the reasons that I wanted to choose them. They're from very similar areas. Both pairs, right, are from very, very similar areas. Same grape breakdown, just like very different winemaking style and different aging. With the Remiuri and the Luberi, I mean, I think that we got there, right? I think that we saw a noticeable difference with the Luberi. Do the Remiuri kind of come through, like the fact that it was aged in French oak? I'm not expecting you to be able to pick up on like, did you notice that it was different size vessels? But more like that it wasn't exactly the same French style as the Barrique. Did that kind of come across a little bit? I'm just going to keep on smelling and drinking Remiuri while you ponder that question. Definitely came across. Cool. I think that, again, and that is something I was saying, that you can't look at a bottle of wine and say like, oh, I know that was aged in such and such oak. You can start to know, if you really dig in, you can start to know that certain wineries are loyal to the kind of oak they use. Other wineries are not. Other wineries do different things for different wines, and that's what's right for them. In the case of Telmo is not, I can't imagine a world in which he's going to age his family's grapes in American oak. So he particularly likes French oak. So you can start to learn that, but it's a lot of learning. It's a lot of reading tech sheets and stuff like that. It's a lot of deciding how much you care. Maybe you don't care. I'm like, that's totally cool. I kind of figure if you're here taking tonight's class, you care somewhat. So, take that for what it's worth. I'm so glad this class was helpful. Are there questions lingering? Alexis is thanking me for doing it for a smaller group. I figure like if we were doing this in person, I think almost all of you are with a partner, right? Almost everybody. So we'd be at pretty much what we would normally have done in person, which would have been like the max amount of people I ever would have been able to talk to in the shop. So a group of this size is great. I feel like you all were able to ask the questions you wanted to have answered. I'm happy to do it. I really am. I love the class where there are lots and lots of people, dozens and dozens of people. And, we're talking about like a high level thing about a grape or something like that. But then I also really like digging in a little bit and getting a little bit nerdier, right? I mean, they're different things, right? It's not beach. This isn't beach reading. Yeah, this is, I don't know, pick your favorite important author. This is Toni Morrison. We'll go with that. Oh, yay. I'm so glad. Thank you. I'm so glad that this class has been so helpful. We are at time, but if there are lingering questions, let me know. And I really am truly counting on you guys to give me some suggestions on things you want to learn, because, I'm open to it all. I'm just kind of curious what people are interested in, particularly as the summer is coming up. I'm curious, like how much do people want to keep doing wine classes? How about for white wines? Do we look for similar oak traits? Yes, generally speaking, you do look for similar oak traits. What you'll notice is like, it kind of makes sense, right? Whereas with red wine, your flavors are going to be more like coffee and mocha and chocolate, dark things. With white wine, you're going to notice it more as caramel, butterscotch, but you can also get like true oakiness in both red and white. So yeah, you'll notice it. French oak will be subtle, right? And it'll be kind of like just a rounder mouthfeel. Whereas American oak is going to be like more pronounced. Mike wants a mead class. I do not think you want a mead class from me. I think that is a great idea, but I am not the person to teach it. I'm just going to leave it there. I'm just going to say that. I don't think you want my thoughts on mead. I try. I'm of Irish heritage, and I've been told I'm supposed to like mead more than I do, but you know, it's only so much I can do. Chardonnay class. I haven't done a Chardonnay class recently, and that's what I was thinking of earlier today. And I was like, but the thing is, as you were picking up on, people avoid the classes for the grapes they don't like, right? They don't come to the thing when they're like, I don't like Chardonnay. And I'm like, yeah, but the whole point is to try, you know, a variety of things and see, you know, and like maybe you genuinely don't like it and there's no getting around it. But I also think that there's Chardonnay out there that people like. You'd go to a Chardonnay class? Okay, well then maybe Chardonnay class is in our future. Price point class. Cheap, mid-ground baller within one grape. Yes, I love it. I love it. But could we do it blind? Could we do it blind? Right? We could do like blind price point, right? Okay. I'm loving you guys. You are so wonderful. Thank you. Could do a class on varieties no one's ever heard of. Yeah. Kristen and I are doing a project that I need to get back on the horn about, A to Z grapes. And I've definitely found some obscure ones. So maybe we could do some, you know, lesser known things. All right, friends, I am going to bid you all adieu. I appreciate you all so much. I hope that you have a lovely evening. If you're not signed up for Loire Valley next Thursday, please do, because it's going to be amazing. And, you know, it does not get more jazz handsy in my house than Loire Valley Whites. So I'll see you then, and then I'll be announcing June classes soon. And from the looks of it, it's going to be virtual. So thanks. Bye, everybody.